Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Mentor Connect, specifically designed for educators from the Ludhiana region. On behalf of LXL Ideas and Mentor Magazine, I'm your host, Sultan Ahmed, and it's an absolute pleasure for me to be hosting this wonderful event. The year 2020 has been quite remarkable in many ways, especially for the education domain. And two big change makers came to our fore last year. The first one being the pandemic, and the less we talk about it, we all know we're living through it. In fact, we're still, coming out of it literally. And apart from the pandemic, there was a big announcement by the government of India, which was the National Education Policy 2020. While principally, I think it's a phenomenally beautiful in terms of the direction, in terms of its vision and what it wants to achieve. But the challenge is that it's very different from what we've done in the past. It's very forward thinking, so it requires a lot of innovation and a lot of hard work on the ground for it to be implemented. And that is where the double whammy happens. While the government wants to implement it, we're now talking about how do we get back to being normal after the pandemic? And that's exactly the reason why we chose this topic of the dilemma of learning loss and academic fatigue. So today, it gives me great pleasure to begin our first segment. We've divided this particular session into two segments. Our first session, we'll talk about, preparing teachers to overcome the NEP challenge. That's the first segment. And our second segment, we'll be talking about addressing the learning deficit, the cumulative learning deficit. To begin with, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to our co-host, someone who has worked tirelessly with my mentor team and the LXL team in putting this entire event together, Dr. Vandna Shahi. Dr. Vandna, such a pleasure. Thank you so much for being so supportive in helping us put this very meaningful program together. Dr. Shahi, ladies and gentlemen, is the principal for the BCM school in Ludhiana from the Durgi Road branch of Ludhiana. She has been a fantastic educator for many, many years. She's the district training coordinator for the CBSE. And the chairperson of the Women's Forum of the Ludhiana Management Association as well. A doctorate in biosciences and an MSc gold medalist. She's been a keynote speaker for several eminent conferences, including a very recently conducted by the International Center for Advancement of Education on a topic of disruption in education. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to our co-host, Dr. Vandna Shahi. Dr. Vandna, I think your mic's on mute, so.
So thank you very much, Sultan, and a very, very good afternoon to each one of you.
Thank you, ma'am. It's such a pleasure to have you. And very quickly, let me introduce you to our amazing panel of speakers that we've lined up. Our first panelist, Archana Gaba. She's the Director Principal of St. Kabir Gurukul in Jalalabad. She's been a master trainer with the CBSE. She's trained NLP practitioner and a master hypnotherapist from the California Hypnosis Institute. So apart from that, her passions toward the vision of taking education has taken her to a remote small village, just 12 kilometers from the Indo-Pak border in Punjab, where she has been operating a premium school to provide the most modern but affordable education to the first generation learners. She is a master trainer for educational interventions and traveled almost all over the country, mentoring hundreds of schools. It's such a pleasure to have you, Mrs. Archana Gaba. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate the fact that you've chosen to be in such a remote part of the country where people choose to be in, the big cities and the big towns. And I'm so glad you're doing this wonderful work.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
And our second panelist, ladies and gentlemen, is the director of the Gyan Manthan Education, Bhatinda, and the Silver Oaks Group of Schools, an experienced professional with over 2 decades of experience with reputed CBSE institutions in various capacities. She's a certified EQFI, the Education Quality Foundation of India trainer for the accreditation of the schools, and has trained the prospective teachers in B.Ed colleges She's got a lot of experience of working and nurturing teachers on the topics of innovative practices in teaching, learning, teaching strategies, and methodologies. She's attended the BET Asia Leadership Summit in 2014, held in Singapore, on the topic of innovative pedagogical advances in the 21st century classrooms. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome Mrs. Barinder K. Shekhon.
Thank you, Sultan, and good afternoon to everybody.
Good afternoon, ma'am. It's such a pleasure to have. And I'm so glad, thanks to the pandemic, this is one of the wonderful things that's happened, that we are all can connect digitally. We don't have to spend that much of time, energy, and efforts, to all come together. And I hope that this newfound, communication that we found can go a long way in bridging that learning divide. Because at Mentor, we've always believed that one of the biggest problems with schools is that they don't share and connect as much as they should. While of course some of them do share, and there are some very good educators who reach out to educators. While the CBSE has the Sahodaya and the ICSE have their own clusters, but yet I believe good practices and good things in education cannot remain in a school. It has to be shared with everyone. And I think this digital medium and today is a good way of taking that forward. And thank you so much for being with us. Our other two panelists, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce the principal of the BCM school in Chandigarh Road, Ludhiana, Mr. Guleria, a seasoned educationist with experience of over 3 decades. He's the recipient of innumerous awards and acclaimed and covetous standing for heading the front-rank BCM schools with distinction as principal, besides taking a quantum leap of leading around 40 CBSE schools under the banner of the CBSE Ludhiana Sahodaya Schools Complex as the director. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome Mr. D.P. Guleria.
Thank you, Mr. Sultan, and good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, Mr. Guleria. Thankfully, you keeping, along with me, the gender, sensitivity alive.
Yeah, definitely.
Otherwise, if left, the ladies kind of rule, which I think is a wonderful thing. I mean, if there is one domain or industry where we don't have to talk about gender equality, I think education is the space, and I'm so glad that it happens, and I hope that continues in the other industries as well. And finally, completing our lineup, we have the principal of the Om Prakash Bansal Modern School from Mandi, Govindgarh, Madam Sangeeta Sharma, who's the principal. She's got over 3 decades of education sector experience associated with CBSE as a resource person for inclusive education and inclusive strategies in classrooms. She's also the presiding district coordinator for teacher training for the district of Fatehgarh Sahib in Punjab. As a principal, her school has received several national level accolades and continues to flourish till date with the vision she brought into every institution. Thank you very much, Mrs. Sangeeta. It's such a pleasure to have you as well. So let me begin. I'm going to ask my co-host, Dr. Vandna Shahi. We've chosen this topic, and specifically in this segment, we're talking about how do you prepare teachers to overcome that NEP challenge, right? Before this, we've had the NCF in 2005, you had the CCE, we've had all kinds of things that have come in. This is something new, which I will personally believe, because both Kalpa Karthik, the editor of Mentor, and me have been a part of the Chintan Shivers for the HRD ministry. I would like you to tell us from your point of view, from where you're sitting as an educator leading a school, how do you define this challenge?
Thank you so much, Sultan. And once upon a time, we used to ask our children, what would you become when you grow up? And gone are the days. As now, even we don't know how would the world look like when they grow up. 10 years from now, many sought after jobs of today might not exist, and many new would emerge, because the world is changing very fast. 2 years back, no one had heard of COVID, and now this pandemic has proved to be the biggest disruption in the history of education. So future is unknown, and the scenario demands armoring our students with the tools to navigate and find their destinations in those hidden tomorrows, right? So there are no future-proof careers, but future-proof skills are there. And I think that's what NEP talks of. So as schools, we have to make our students innovative, critical and independent thinkers, problem solvers, work in collaboration, and be resilient at the time of adversity. Easier said than done. So teachers, being the backbone of the school system, have to deliver on the vision, mission, and curriculum of NEP, which requires, according to me, multiple pedagogical approaches and also extensive training. So in this particular segment, we would like to hear from all of you, how are you preparing them so that they can deliver on the desired skill set as a learning outcome? So over to you, Sultan, for the moderation.
So in a bottom line, a large part of the responsibility actually lies with the teacher on the ground. You know, ma'am, I'm reminded of a few years ago. This was, I think, in 2014. I was speaking at a conference in London, and there was a presenter from Argentina. And the title of his presentation was Teacher Killed the Smart Class. Right? And, all he went on to talk about was what a beautiful innovation technology was, especially the smart class in the classroom, and how badly it was implemented across the world. So while we sitting in India believe that, it didn't work in India, by the way, it has not worked anywhere in the world. Right? So a large part of any new innovation that happens in education, the responsibility lies with the teacher. So I'm going to start off, by asking Archana Gabaman to come in here. How do you identify what are those skills? What are those areas that you would want to address, and how would you go about doing this? Let me start with you, Archana. Ma'am, you're on mute. Can I request you to? Yeah. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for this opportunity and for a very gracious introduction. And Vandna Shahi ma'am has rightly pointed that what we actually have to aim at is our students to be independent thinkers, and to make somebody independent in thinking requires everything, every idea, every like weaponry is a word she has used, everything that we can use for this. About the implementation of NEP, my worst fear is only this, that like CCE, this time it should not happen like that. That superficial understanding and shallow implementation syndrome is something which I'm really scared of. It should not happen like that. So first of all, our teachers have to understand, and even the school leaders have to understand the big picture of the NEP. Because once we know the vision, only then we can plan our direction of movement, right? So to my understanding, if we look at the big picture, the major dots which are there, which we all need to join for our teachers, is that NEP wants us to have cross-curricular themes, skills and competences, in place first of all. So when we design our curriculum and our year in school, we have to keep this, very much in mind. Secondly, all students and teachers, both, regardless of the starting points, they need to be able to access learning. There have to be multiple entry points for everybody to join in the learning wherever they are. Because due to the COVID, this is really ironic and challenging both, that first there was this COVID and 94% of the students all over the globe have been affected by it, badly. If we look at the data, my experience has been based on the L0 assessments that we conducted in our schools, that students lost approximately a year of reading skills and approximately 2 years of mathematical, learning. So keeping that in mind, it's very important that students are offered multiple entry points towards learning whatever, the way forward they have, whatever next they have to learn. Secondly, there has to be coherence in learning progression, which we really, lack. Because after one grade, when the students go to the other grade, the teacher looks at the curriculum only, and the curriculum provided by NCERT or whatever. And if due to COVID or any situation that curriculum is reduced, those gaps are left forever. They are never filled, right? So there has to be a shared framework for thinking and reasoning for everybody. Generally, schools invest a lot on learning management systems for their students. I believe the schools now have to be schools for teachers equally. There has to be a proper learning management system for teachers also, because things are changing from where they were. And all the learning strategies have to be made based on the multiple intelligence and multiple interests of our students, because our students have had a look at the world at large, due to the COVID and due to having smartphone in their hands. Everybody got access to that, right? So earlier, what I've noticed that generally students in one teacher's class develop the base same dominant intelligence which teacher had. Like if a teacher is a visual learner or visual and audio learner, auditory learner, the students tend to become so, and those who do not, they can't thrive in her class. So generally what is happening is that we end up doing chalk and talk in our classes and everywhere. And tragedy is this also, that when we go for trainings, when we train our teachers, there again, we are not able to follow the pedagogy which we want them to follow. Like we trainers, we are also bound that we have to complete all this within those limited hours. So we have no other way than to, use chalk and talk. And I'm not, freeing myself from this blame. I mean, we all need to be more prepared, based on giving teachers also different entry points toward this learning. And finally, I would want to say that we need to give up on our previous assumptions, because world has changed. It is difficult to, change perspective to an extent that you just change your vantage point, but that is what it has to be done. Principals do not now need offices, actually. Okay, we don't need any chairs to sit on, because the action is happening somewhere else, and that is our action, that is our circus. We have to be in the ring now, and whatever is happening, giving that a big picture look, giving that a coherence, giving that a proper connection is the role of the principal. Because if the gaps remained now, after that, maybe we will not get an opportunity. COVID has been a challenge, but COVID has become a great opportunity also for us. We were doing remote teaching so far, but now we are shifting to online and, synchronous education. So this is high time that when everybody has access to technology, let us not somehow, convince them to put it aside, as is becoming the case again, put the smartphones aside and get back to notebooks and pens and everything, because nobody is going to read. I mean, for last 2 to 3 years, I don't remember when I ever picked up my pen other than to attest a document, to write something. And we put so much onus on handwriting and creating notes, and then there are, assignment assessments and all. So I guess these assumptions we have to let go of. These are our favorite activities in the school, but somehow we have to let go of all this.
That's wonderful. They just
over to you, Sultan. You are muted, I guess.
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Yes. Can you hear my voice?
I can't hear you.
Yes,
Can
yes,
others?
Sultan, it's okay.
do?
In fact, Archana ma'am, it's a problem from your end, probably. Please check that.
Okay, perfect. So I think Archana ma'am, you've just, opened up and given us so many different perspectives. One of the things that you spoke about was to leave our previous assumptions. And I think that's the biggest lesson that the COVID should have taught all of us. And let me be very candid and let me be very clear over here. For almost 20, 25 years, there's been a lot of technology interventions that have been in education. These are great tools that were available, but somewhere, somehow, we were not able to use it. And I think the biggest benefit that education has got is that most educators have started experiencing the benefit of using technology, and which is what you were talking about. And you very beautifully mentioned that there should be an LMS for teachers. LMSs are designed first for a teacher and then for a student. Unfortunately, the way schools in India look at education is everything is for the child. You know, the infrastructure is for the child, the pedagogy is for the child, the sports facilities are for the child. I would definitely take a cue from what you said, and schools need to start designing themselves to become very teacher friendly. Because when you talk about child friendly schools, I think we need to be teacher friendly schools, which are also child friendly. And you also talked about this big challenge of children coming in at multiple points now. So a grade 7 student, probably some of them are in grade 5 still, and some of them are in grade 6, right? So a teacher's challenge becomes much bigger. And also, very importantly, you pointed out this point about training. You know, the traditional teacher training methodologies, they need to evolve and they need to move on with the time. And I think these are some very, very relevant points. I'm going to bring in Barinder, ma'am, now. Ma'am, how do you respond to this challenge of, preparing teachers? How are you doing it in your school, and what are your thoughts on this?
Thank you, Mr. Sultan. I think coming in of NEP at this point of time, when we have just opened the schools after COVID, it's a great challenge, because otherwise past 1.5 years, we could have actually used in preparing our teachers and everything for preparing for NEP execution, because it's a beautiful program if we see, and it's a beautiful evolution as you mentioned. And if we are actually able to execute it, and this new education system, we would be grooming our children, and whatever challenges which we are facing today in the field of education, we'll be able to overcome them. The reason is because nowadays, if I talk of our school students, the gap between the schooling and the higher education is such that when we talk of the skill development and actual interests of the children, there is a huge gap and a huge difference in it. What we are producing today, the parents till grade 12th, they just impose certain subjects on their children, and the kids are just studying them. Suppose if I talk of the smalls, if we are catering to the small cities, here they just have two career options. One is to be an engineer and other is to be a doctor. So the kids, by force, the parents want them to study those same subjects, and right from the beginning they are graded in that manner. And fortunately or unfortunately, if somebody doesn't clear those competitions, they are back to square one, and they're left with no other skills, no other options with them. So in that way, we really welcome this program NEP, wherein the students can, right from the beginning only, they can start thinking and the skills, and they can make better career choices, I would say. But for that, the responsibility and the onus comes on the school leaders, on the teachers. Now here, as it's already mentioned by Mrs. Archana, I also agree with her that the responsibility of the teachers, and today the kind of teachers which we get, if I talk after coming doing the BA trainings and all, they actually need lots of skill development for themselves also. So first thing which an organization should be doing is to develop the skills of their educators, who will further educate the children. To make a school child centric also, the first interest of any organization should be to give some attention to the development and the training of the teachers. Like in our schools, what we follow is, we follow the ask model, wherein we build in an attitude for the teachers, wherein they build in an attitude for the training, then certain skill development takes place, and then comes their knowledge. Because if they have the attitude, they have the skills, the knowledge, yes, they can give and they can share it with the students. And knowledge is not the only thing which is required to be shared or which is to be given. More important is to build in the environment where the students come and they take those skill sets and knowledge. Because in what happened in the online classes was we were just giving knowledge, the education was missing, because we could not educate our students. Because what happens when they're sitting in a group with the physical interaction, as ma'am said, now sitting in the chair and just using the chalk and board talk will not help, because they have to actually reach out to the students and start developing that skills with the students. That's what NEP actually wants us. And the students should be well equipped and empowered to choose in the subjects at the later stage. So if what they were doing after 10th grade, we have to prepare them much before that, and we have to identify their interests, what they can take up right from class 8th onwards or from class 10th onwards. So these are the things. What I personally feel is the teachers should themselves be knowing and should be empowered to know NEP right properly. These days, whatever trainings happens, they were just happening at the higher level. If I talk of the school levels, right, going down to the teachers, how well are our teachers equipped? So first question with us should be that we equip our teachers, we fix in their accountability to the teachers to execute this new NEP program. For that, definitely there should be a fixed hours, I would say, per year, that these many hours, when we recruit a teacher, normally we fix, say, 60 hours of a training per year is compulsory for them. That was now when it was not NEP. But if we take coming in of the NEP, I think it should be much more. At short intervals, they should be also having the refresher courses, wherein we train them with the new technologies, with new innovations which are coming. And whatever programs which we give them, we should not be limited to the offline programs, because now, since COVID has been given us one big boon, I say, in field of education, as we started in the beginning, that now we can connect online with the other schools across the world, and we can share the best practices what are going on. What NEP tells us today is already there in many of the other countries. That's how they are training their children. So the sharing programs, the schools should collaborate with good schools abroad, outside India also. They should try and take in the best practices from there, and definitely those best practices and way they execute it, way they just imbibe, make the kids imbibe or instill the skills in them. Those practices should be taken. That kind of sharing should happen, I think, and that will help us a lot to execute it in proper manner. Because what normally happens in India is we do have number of good policies are made, good pedagogies are there, but when it comes to execution, we are not able to do it 100%. Or even if we do it, we succeed in doing it 80% also. I think it would bring a great change in our system. So
Wonderful.
that is what is required.
Wonderful. I think very beautifully you put across 2 or 3 extremely critical points. One, you talked about the number of hours that are dedicated for teacher development.
Yeah.
While you mentioned 60 hours was what we did in the past. If my memory serves me right, in Singapore, in-service teachers are expected to undergo approximately 50 days of learning a year. Right? So even if you multiply that by 6 hours a day, you're talking about approximately 300 hours. And I think whatever is the math on that, there is no denying the fact that we need to increase the amount of time that is put on teacher development. You very nicely talked about the ask module, which was about attitudes and then skilling them, whereas the knowledge is the easier part, and that's the more irrelevant part of the world today, because the world does not value information as much as it did a decade ago, because information is available for everybody. The world values most today is the attitude. Because if you ask me from the corporate world side, what are corporates looking at? What are investors looking at when they want to invest in a new entrepreneur? It's the attitude, right? And then skill, according to them, is you can hire the skill if you want.
True,
Whereas the attitude is something that you cannot. So I think not just for teachers, but even for students. As a passing comment, you brought in probably a very critical point about the parent and their attitude not changing. While I would go to the extent of saying that in the past year and a half, the parental mindset towards academic grades probably has regressed than progressed. Because the past year has seen the biggest amount of money spent by edtech companies anywhere, any point of time in our lifetime that we have seen. The amount of advertising and marketing for parents on which course that they should take up, which coaching class they should go, which one is giving them marks. I think one of the challenges that needs to be addressed through the teacher and through the principals as well is the parent itself and their attitude. And thank you for highlighting that. Mr. Gulere, I'm going to come to you. While you were listening to these two wonderful thoughts from Archana ma'am and Barinder ma'am, what's going on? What are you doing in your schools?
Thank you, Mr. Sultan. In my opinion, NEP 2020 is a very forward-looking document, and as it focuses on both teachers and students' learning. So in our system, what we are doing, we are trying to ascertain the needs of students and teachers both. As you all know that the pandemic has created certain gaps in the learning. So in our school, what we are doing is we are trying to find out and trying to build a bridge course for children. At the same time, teachers' empowerment is very important. So keeping that in mind, in our school, we are trying to ascertain the needs for professional development through collaborative processes. For that, certain mechanisms, they are there in the school system, and we are co-constructing those mechanisms with the faculty, and keeping in mind the individual needs of teachers. So normally for children learning and teachers empowerment, we use certain kinds of rubrics, checklist, and rating scale with the faculty members. And thereafter, these mechanisms, they are applied throughout the year. Throughout means very frequently we use those mechanisms to ascertain whether the learning has taken place or not. It is both with teachers as well as with children. And thereafter, the committees, we have subject-wise committees where the department heads, they have individual talk with the teachers and they try to find out their individual professional development needs. On the basis of that, we have certain modules and we run those modules throughout the year on the basis of the requirement for the teachers. Like for primary, we have different modules. From secondary, middle, and senior secondary, we have different modules. At the same time, we try to motivate the children and go for the online professional programs, professional development programs, which are being offered by CBSE and other agencies. So in a nutshell, we give a SMART goal to all the teachers as well as children. And after those SMART goals, again, we apply those rubrics and checklists and rating skills, whether the learning that has taken place or not. At the same time, in our system, we encourage the teachers to observe and study effective instructional practices of the colleagues. I believe that the teachers, means every teacher has something good in them. One teacher may be very good in a particular segment of her subject and others may not be. So we encourage the teacher to share those best practices there in the classrooms. And we have a planned curriculum, planned schedule for the teachers for this professional development. Once in a week, there is a stay back for 1 hour, because I believe that throughout the day, the teachers, they are busy doing multitasking. So they won't be able to focus on the training part. So that is why in a week, we have one department stay back, and in that stay back, the teachers, they have the study of effective instruction practices of the colleagues. Sometimes we call the experts from outside. Sometimes we collaborate with other schools, and those schools, they offer us the guidance, their best teachers, their best practices, they are shared and they are taken by our own teachers. And the learning groups, they are created among the students and the children both. We use the reflective practices where the reflective practices, they are utilized further to better the learning in the classes. Very often, we have a collaboration with the parents, and normally on PTNs, we have PTN month-wise. On PTNs, we take a feedback. We give a feedback form that is a kind of rubrics to parents, and they give a feedback to the teachers. And the class teacher means collects those feedback forms and shares with the teachers who are teaching that particular class. So this is how we are taking the feedback from the parents, and we are involving the parents in the learning process also. Further, I believe that means it's not only the children, but teachers. Mr. Sultan rightly said that everything is for students in the school system. But now we have to think about teachers also. So the kind of environment, the culture the school must have, so that the teachers, they learn and they have something good out of the system that has to be promoted. At the same time, we give liberty to teachers to innovate. So a kind of initiative for innovation in school. So that kind of culture we are trying to have in the school system.
Right.
And further, we try that the teacher, they expand perspective about innovative pedagogies. It's not that they have a fixed lesson plan and everybody has to use that lesson plan there in the classes, but we give the liberty and the choices they are with teachers to have different kind of pedagogies. Right. I give one example. The teachers who are teaching science there in the classes, sometimes they take the class out.
I'll come back to you, Mr. Guleria, but the challenge is, I mean, one thing that I gather from you is a lot of stress on data collection and, reviewing it, rubrics that you kept talking about. I'm going to come back to you as to how would you handle the challenge of integrating academic scholastics and co-scholastic, which is what the NEP wants us to do, right? How do we bring in the extracurricular activities at par? But you mentioned a couple of very beautiful things. One of them that I definitely want to look at is, and most schools would have to do it, they don't have a choice, is a bridge course for students, which is what even Archana ma'am was talking about, because not all students will be ready for that particular level. Right. So there's that bridging program is something which is very critical, which probably now schools are going through. And the other one is something that I very rarely hear, is probably what I picked up from you. When we talk about today, technology allows personalization of education for children. I think even teacher training needs to be personalized. We don't need to put all teachers in the same bucket and drive the same learning programs, because every teacher is also going to be at different levels of evolution and different levels of learning. So let me come to you, Sangeeta ma'am. You've been listening to this, and what's on top of your mind? What are your thoughts running on this topic?
Good afternoon, Mr. Sultan. In fact, you have just touched upon this, what I was trying to, convey, that we talk about uniqueness of every learner. Learners are students as well as teachers. Both of them are learners, and in NEP, or whether with NEP or without NEP, we talk about lifelong learning. So irrespective whether NEP is there or not, the process of learning has to continue. So now linking the training part with learning, that is precisely the topic. So when it comes as a mandate from CBSE that 50 hours of training is compulsory for the teachers. Now, what type of trainings a teacher can choose? This option is also given to the teachers. Now, this is where the challenge came. I'm sharing from my school's experience. The teachers started doing any left, right, center, any kind of training just to add up 50 hours. So this is what led me to maintain a portfolio of every teacher. I wanted to see which training has been conducted. So by the end of the month, that Excel sheet came in front. So to my horror and surprise, my sports teacher were attending chemistry classes. Chemistry teachers were attending library classes. It's okay, library can be attended by anybody. But for God's sake, chemistry teacher, sports teacher doing chemistry, science, kindergarten, every possible, just to cover up those 50 hours because it's a mandate. So here is wherein, this is how, who is doing what and who is monitoring. And when we are giving a free hand, so what is that freedom doing to the teachers? So paperwork is complete, but outcome is nil. So basically the cultural, when we talk about the effectiveness of trainings, it has to be carefully scrutinized and monitored. And it should be, again, it should be in sync with the needs of the teacher and in sync with the needs of the school and the target group of the students we are dealing with. So this is where the challenge, our school, initially to start with, this was discovered very soon, and we cut into quick. So I got my systems in place. So we had to closely see who is doing what. And then attending a training is not enough. It has to be translated into learning. It has to be, yes, whatever learning has been, whatever is the takeaway of a workshop has to be integrated into the classroom learning procedure. So this is where we need to monitor whether the linkages are there or not. So we, as an outcome of this procedure, we have formulated a core team in the school with the name Impact Group. Now, Impact Group just does the, hand-holding of all the teachers. Like Mr. Guleri has already said, we have HODs, we have subject supervisors, things like that. So the core Impact team monitors and handholds all the teachers. We have student feedback, we have teacher feedback, and we have classroom observation checklists. All these three elements are being designed with the equal participation of students and teachers. So it's not that I'm devising them and then we are just telling them to go ahead and implement. No, we have all the stakeholders sitting together and coming up with these checklists or observation parameters, and these parameters are then being put into practice. Everyone knows the accountability factor comes in when everybody is part of that procedure, devising procedure. They know what is coming, they know what are the expectations, and they know that whatever learning they are undergoing independently, it has to be a shared learning as well. So the whole process of this impact program comes out to be very positive, though at times, we have different types of learners, we have different kind of students, so all the teachers can't come up at the same level. So we have buddy groups in the teachers also. We talk about buddy groups for the students, we have actually buddies for the teachers also, and this is coming out to be very, very nice. And the result is coming out to be good. And the next thing that we are working on is data management. That's very important. See, we are using data for reporting X thing, Y thing, Z thing. But what are we going to do with the data? Any kind of data that is coming up. So the teachers, I'm working on that. The teachers should know how to do data management, analysis of data, so that it's not going waste of submissions to CBSE or to teachers or to management. We need to really do what is the the judicial use of this whole drill of generating data. Basically replacing guesses with facts, or identifying current with the expected outcomes, or eliminating ineffective practices. This is important. Next is that I feel that the multitasking and time management is one big factor which teachers are struggling with, because too much is happening too fast, too many expectations. Daily you get one manual from CBSE that teachers should implement it. So we are getting too much too soon. So time management is one big factor. It's a skill that we need to master. And multitasking, again, very, very important, because incorporating curricular and co-curricular, and how to integrate sports into the in a science class, or how to have English with the Nukkad Natak, everything. So it takes time. Time management. Resource management is one skill which comes up with 21st century skills.
Right.
Here I'm linking it with 21st century because to deliver 21st century students, we need to have a team soldiers, lieutenants who are well equipped with 21st century skills themselves. So my lieutenants are my teachers. So before they walk into the classes to groom students for 21st century skills, they themselves have to have it. So all these things, all these trainings should be actually for the teachers only, and which is what is happening. So my target is, in my school, teachers first, students will automatically, they'll get fixed up themselves. I need to focus on only on my faculty. That is what
I loved your last statement, because I personally genuinely believe, because I'm in a very vantage position where I transcend different industries. I work very closely in the education space. I run a very large filmmaking company, and I'm in the event space, and I'm in an entrepreneur. So I interact with a lot of different companies. Any good corporate organization focuses on its employees, whereas the customers for their businesses are not sitting in their offices, they are outside, right? For the school, the difference is that if customer is a bad word, not the right, it doesn't communicate, but your key stakeholders are also in the school, right? Whereas your biggest focus has to be, like you very rightly said, take care of the teachers, everything else falls in place. You brought about another important point. Before I go to Dr. Shahi, asking her for her thoughts, you talked about data management. Okay, I just wanted to pick up this point. If all schools start using technology well, the role of a principal will be data mining and looking at data and data-driven decisions, right? Which is what CEOs do. The CFOs and corporates are doing that today. What I'm talking about is not something which is happening in space. Most organizations today, whether it comes to sales initiatives, new product development, recruitment, client understanding, market knowledge, everything is data driven. You'll be surprised at the amount of data which a CEO, CFO, or CMO uses before they make their decisions. Somehow in schools, we have not yet reached there. And that's where I'm going to ask one question to Archana ma'am before I go finally to Dr. Shahi. Ma'am, you spoke about the usage of LMS, right? Could you slightly elaborate on the role of technology in teacher development? And then I will ask Dr. Shahi to, sum up all the thoughts that we've heard today. You're on mute, ma'am. No, I think your mic is off. Yes, on your system. Yes.
Yeah. So I guess this is the question which at this stage, every teacher, everybody connected with a school system or education can answer now, because they have seen how technology has given them superpowers. So LMS cannot exist, cannot be, its potential cannot be optimized without technology. That goes without saying. As far as, ma'am's this point about data management, I would say that LMS also has to be designed, created, and then updated based on the data. Data literacy is the very first thing on that should be the premise on which any learning management system can be created for the teachers. You said that generally LMSs are for teachers, but we think that this is a product for students. See, teachers, as long as a teacher will think that they are just the providers, the suppliers of answers, they will think of LMS like a carry bag in which, whatever their customer asks, for a better word for students, they can just keep putting in and then they just give it to them. So this is just, LMS system is just like that for them so far. But if it becomes, a progressive system where they are also challenged, where they are also, kind of connecting with, if there is a scope for connecting with different levels of students, only then such a system can really work what it is supposed to work for.
Thank you. Thank you for that. There's a quick question for Sangeeta ma'am before I finally go. One of the audiences has asked, Gauri has asked you a question. Do you have any examples of data management done in your school, Sangeeta ma'am?
Yes, sir.
and along with any other tools that you are using?
So we got the training from Google itself using Google tools. That is what I'm thankful to CBSE about. We had these trainings from CBSE, and we were able to do so many tools like Mentimeter, and there's a whole list of, because it varies from usage to usage, whether it's for teaching or something. Data management tools we have devised for our own school. I think I'm using it for the last 5 or 6 years. We have developed our own management system, and it's a customized systems depending upon the needs of my school. We have we have outsourced the development of the tool, so we have it in accordance with the needs of our school. It makes it very easy. For example, see ma'am, talk about report cards. Okay, by very basic thing which every school has. So you talk about class 6, 7, 8. Okay, let me talk about language. This is how I came to know about language. Language, you look at the language graph. You have the marks or grades or whatever, and then you identify components. For example, speaking skills. Okay, you identify again a component. There are marks or grades for that. So this data system and this tool will tell you, okay, this grade, this is the reading level. This is the you have the graph, you have the graphical representation. You know where are the spikes and where are the peaks and where are the dips. So you identify, and then it comes down. It is student specific also. You can be as specific as possible. So it depends upon how detailed your tool is or how detailed your systems are. So I could identify that there are my students of my class 1 were not able to speak or understand the blends and the diagrams. So this was the missing link which I had to fix up, because my class 3 student was not a good reader, not a writer. I could identify where the language gap was. That was the blends in class 1 and 2. So we customized our lesson plans accordingly, and we modified the syllabus. So it really helps you to identify or diagnose. In short, I can say, if you talk about teaching, the diagnostic teaching tool, it can be, you can identify, you can be as specific as possible. For example, in maths, which calculation, which part, whether it is the statistical part or the general operations, you can identify anything. Because being a special educator, it was very important for me. It was very painful to see that a child, a very good child, is good in maths and not good in English, or good in English, not good in maths. What is wrong where? So this concept of diagnostic teaching started, and from class 12 teaching level, I went down to kindergarten, and I could find out where the gaps were. The gaps were in the junior classes. How could I expect a class 10th child to do trigonometry if his concepts of angles is not clear? His concepts of lines is not clear. So I went down and down. So this diagnostic approach can lead to the usage of tools, and you can devise, or you can get them, you can outsource the tools, or you can use the tools available now. With the things easily available online, many tools are available. But the thing is, when I talk about the data management is data is there. What you do with the data? See, every day principal comes, you have before the PTM, you have the Excel sheets of all the marks in front of you, and there are blue underlines and green underlines. But what do you do with them? Okay, you just ask your teachers at PTM, kindly tell the parents, okay, look after, handhold kar lena, yeah, you pass on your suggestions to the parents. No, the onus is on the school. And I think to decipher the data is the main thing. How smartly you decipher the data, and then use the tools and information available, and then cut into quick. This is what the school's responsibility is.
Very interesting, and that is the changing role of the leader in a school. I just have one recommendation here for Gauri, who was asking that question. The key is to digitize the teaching learning process. When you digitize the teaching learning process, the result, the data is instantly available. Otherwise, what happens is we are adding more burden to the teacher to transfer physical learning to digital and then doing it. So just keep this in mind. The key reason why edtech companies get $1 billion valuation is because the learner and the teacher and the content are all digital, and that's a scalable model. So, Dr. Shahi, we come to the end of this segment. We've heard some very, very varied points from all our wonderful panelists. Let me hear your thoughts and summing up this session before we move on to our second segment.
So thank you, Sultan, once again. And I would like to say that is the power of deliberations, discussions, and brainstorming. So many good points coming up, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Like, I was really, really impressed with when Archana ma'am, she said, schools for the teachers. Even I had read a book it is by Neela Konoras, which says, if you don't feed the teachers, please excuse me for my throat. If you don't feed the teachers, they will eat the students. That's a very, very interesting book. In fact, that talks completely about teachers training. Then principal being the playing captain, leading the teaching learning process from the front. So I would say as a principal, whichever aspects I'm taking, whether it is integrating technology, whether it is about the training programs, of course they have to be the need-based program, then hand-holding through the impact team, as Sangeeta ma'am was also mentioned about that. But one thing is very important, that we need to see the school community also. Because as I said, the world is changing very fast. The generation gap also, it has come to 5 to 7 years only. If I talk about the teachers, we have generation X or just a few millennials sitting in as teachers, but the students are the digital natives. They are either generation Z or they are from alpha generation. So influencing the mindsets of the teachers, challenging their assumptions to integrate technology, because as somebody said, now or never. Now this was an opportunity actually, this pandemic has given us an opportunity that we can challenge the complete model. We can change the complete model. We don't do away with the physical classes, but of course that hybrid model, it has to come. Let technology do rest of the things and the teachers focus on the students' outcome, because technology would definitely prove to be the game changer. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much. And it was actually wonderful having you all there. Thank you, Sultan. Over to you.
Thank you. And I'm going to take this opportunity to very quickly thank Archana ma'am, Barinder ma'am, Sangeeta ma'am, and Mr. Guleria. It was so good, listening to all your thoughts and your perspectives. I request you to stay back as we move into our next segment, which is talking about addressing the cumulative learning deficit. I'll just take a moment to get my panelists on board and then start off with the segment right away. Thank you all so much. It was so nice listening to all your wonderful perspectives. Kalpa would be collating all your points and then sharing it with all the participants as well. All right, I have my
Good afternoon, Mr. Sultan.
Good afternoon. I'll just wait for our other two panelists to join in.
Please,
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Mr. Sultan. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone.
We're all set. Not too much of time that we took to swap. And we're continuing with our Mentor Connect here with my co-host, Dr. Vandna Shahi. This segment, in our previous segment, we were focusing on, the teacher. In this segment, we would want to focus a little more on the student, right? And the pandemic has thrown up one very big challenge, and that challenge is the learning gap between when the student stopped coming physically to school, March, April 2020, And even today, I'm told, I'm talking about as latest as yesterday, when I was talking to one of my friends, one of the prominent schools of Bangalore, this is the Delhi Public School, uh, not a single child comes to school. Parents are still scared. I'm talking about Bangalore. While the government has given, the green signal for schools to start, the school teachers are coming, but still there is that fear. That means even this year, so almost 2 academic years, the students are staying away, and this will definitely bring about a learning deficit. And in our session now, we're going to be addressing that. And I welcome back Dr. Vandna Shahi. And let me quickly introduce you to our panelists. Dr. Paramjeet Kaur, thank you so much for joining us, ma'am. She's a very senior principal with the BCM Arya School from Shastri Nagar in Ludhiana. She's been an academician for almost 3 decades and a recipient of the CBSE National Award from the Government of India. She has been following the CBSE curriculum. She's been with the IGCSE curriculum, and she's won several awards, and her school is ranked in the Limca Book of Records as well as the Guinness World Records. Such a pleasure to have you here, Dr. Paramjeet.
Thank you so much.
And
My
looking
pleasure.
forward to learning from you on from your experience. Our second panelist, ladies and gentlemen, the principal from the Springdale Senior School in Amritsar, Mr. Rajiv Kumar. He's been a principal from the year 2009. It's been a while. That's what, almost 12, 13 years. Armed with a master's in English literature and education. He's also done courses on learning disabilities from the INPA on mind, brain, and education, and the future of learning from the Harvard Gardner School of Education, child protection, family engagement in education, and leaders of learning from Harvard. He believes in holistic development of children and advocates improvisation to enhance quality of education. He believes in lifelong learning and prefers to call himself a seeker. Such a pleasure, Mr. Rajiv Kumar, to have you here in this panel, and I'm looking forward to your thoughts and your opinions on this particular and a very important topic, especially in the background that we now want to implement the NEP as well. See, as it is getting back to normalcy from the pandemic itself is a big challenge. Now, within that challenge, we've added a new dynamic of trying to implement the NEP. Our third panelist, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Girish Kumar, is the principal from the APJ School in Jalandhar. He is a university gold medalist and an English honors, has been teaching English for the past 23 years and has taught in some best boarding schools in the country, including the Mayo College in Ajmer. A keen sports enthusiast and an avid trekker, has trekked on several mountain peaks in Uttarakhand, in Bhutan, in Korea. He believes that sports completes education, and I completely agree with you. I've been a life skills facilitator all my life, and if there is one way to teach children life skills, put every child through sport every day for 1 hour all their life. You don't need to do anything more than that. And so true. He's also been recognized as an effective global leader 2020 by the Global Talk Education. Mr. Girish Kumar, such a pleasure to have you here, and genuinely looking forward to your perspective. And finally, completing our panelists over here, ladies and gentlemen, we've got Harmeet Kaur, ma'am. She's the principal of the Nankana Sahib Public School. Let me just stop sharing so that we get all our panelists. Yeah, Harmeet Kaur, ma'am, thank you so much for joining us. She was appointed as a Deputy City Coordinator of Ludhiana by CBSE. She's been working as a subcommittee member for the Education Department, SGPC. She's been associated with a number of CBSE training programs and workshops for teachers as a master trainer, the CCE, classroom management, time management, stress-free classroom environment. She's trained over 3,000 teachers and 400 principals. Wow, that's a lot of experience. Harmeet Kaur, ma'am, thank you so much. And it's such a pleasure to have all of you here. I'm going to request Dr. Vandna Shahi to start off and give us an insight into the topic. And then I will move to the panelists to talk about solutions, to talk about what will work, what needs to be done. Vandna, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much, Sultan. India's learning crisis is not a news. National Achievement Survey of 2017, 1 in 3 students of class 3 cannot read simple text with comprehension. 1 in 2 students not able to do simple mathematical operations of addition and subtraction. Then ACER 2018, 50% of class 5 students could not read class 2 level text. And PISA 2009, we all have seen that out of 73 participating countries, India stood at 72 position. So that was the situation before year 2020 onwards. This pandemic, it aggravated the loss and worsened the situation. Now the learning loss is due to missed classes as well as forgotten concepts. Because learning during this period basically was intended to maintain some level of continuity in education and not as a focus on the learning outcomes. So in concept-based topics, learning happens in cumulative manner only. You cannot progress to the next level until you have done the previous one. It's like trying to learn running without learning to walk. So loss of learning at primary level especially, it leads to loss of many foundational skills that are critical to acquiring higher order abilities related to reading, writing, mathematics. And also the social, emotional, physical, and mental health got affected, which has a negative cognitive impact on several children, further leading to the reducing of ability to learn. So in this particular segment, we shall try to find out the ways and means to address this cumulative learning deficit. Thank you so much, Sultan, and over to you now.
Thank you very much. Very beautifully in your own words, you've put the problem together out there. And if I have to talk about it in a layman's language, children will struggle to cope and keep up with the pace of change in their academic expectation. And in this change, if you have to add the new NEP's perspective, it's a lot of change that will happen in the life of a child, right? What will be the role of a teacher? What's the role of a parent? And what is the kind of support a student would need? Those are broad areas that I'm seeking answer. So let me start with Dr. Paramjeet. Doctor, can I request you to come in and share your thoughts? How are you looking at this problem and what are you looking at possible solutions and the role of parents and teachers here? You are on mute, ma'am. If you can just unmute your icon, please. Yes, perfect.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think it's a very relevant topic that you have selected. I must congratulate you on this, that it's so relevant and it's so, the right thing at this time, because we know that no one can reach the top if the initial rung is not strong and supportive. The core idea underlying cumulative learning is that learning of humans is cumulative by nature. So the learned knowledge that one has obtained through various experiences, they are consolidated, reproduced, and exploited for further learning situations. While everyone agrees that this learning is cumulative, but we very conveniently ignore the fact that failure to learn is also cumulative. So cumulative learning deficit is very subtle fact, and which it paves way for long-term dire consequences. And it is at the school level, we need to take care of this in a very proper manner. And I think the teachers and the parents, as you asked me to what role the teachers can play to ensure that the children do not face these dire consequences of this learning deficit. Well, it's said that the quality of education of any education system cannot exceed the quality of the teachers. Hence, the teachers possess that power or that potential to give learning curve any desired direction. Whatever direction they want to give depends all in their hands. Foremost, the teachers must be well versed and well equipped with the comprehensive knowledge and skills to deal with the different situations of cumulative learning deficit. The onus is on us, the leaders, to train our teachers for this. A stitch in time saves 9. If the teacher provides enough practice in synthesizing information of basic skills, no learning deficit or gap can ever occur. Teaching and learning is to be conducted in a more interactive manner if questions are encouraged, and classroom sessions, they are more fun-filled, creative, collaborative, and exploratory. Such activities are carried out in the classrooms. They will ensure a deeper and more experiential learning. Students come to class with a repertoire of disconnected and often contradictory ideas. Teachers must train students to integrate their ideas and promote the most fruitful, generative, and useful ideas. Today, most students are tested on the topics they studied in the latest unit and often quite superficially. Everybody agrees that we just, for the sake of assessment, and assessment is carried out. There is seldom expectation of applying concepts learned in prior units or the next topic or course. To remedy this situation, what I would suggest is they should have cumulative learning using embedded assessment results. CLEAR, CLEAR, as suggested by the education policy. This is proving to be quite useful. Teachers should be trained to assess the children as per this policy. Teachers must go through the discovery process. He or she must find out what the student knows and what he or she doesn't know. Both the things she should know, and devise a way to teach to their shared cumulative knowledge. Intellectual skills can be broken into simpler skills, leaving no scope for cumulative learning deficit. Practice of personalized blended learning. They should, they must have cumulative files to research on students' educational history, so that they can help the teacher tackle, this will help the teacher tackle the students when they know the educational history of the child. Special education folder to guide parents about the progress, behavior, student work samples by counseling them and promoting socio-emotional growth. Not only the children, the emotional health or the mental health, psychosocial health of children is to be taken care of, even the teachers. We must ensure that the teachers are also, geared up to challenge these children and help them come out of this. Teaching them to synthesize information before applying in complex situations, constructive guidance, and praising students to show more encouragement in learning. These are some ways that teachers can be, motivated to overcome this. And this challenge has become even more challenging after the pandemic, as Mr. Sultan has rightly said. These problems we already had before the pandemic, but they have been aggravated because of this. This learning gaps have become, this learning deficit has become a very big challenge as of now. And we all know how the children were promoted during the pandemic. Year 2021, March, how the children were promoted, we knew where they are, but then they were sent to the next grades. And as for parents, I think they should provide social and emotional support, because many learners face difficult times in their families. And it is a major cause of this deficit because they do not get that environment at home. So parents also have to play a very important role, in overcoming this. They must ensure a good amount of different language at an enjoyable and interactive style. It is said that a child from 2 to 8 years is able to learn as many languages as possible. So I think parents should initiate this at their level also, and then, but with a particular emphasis on mother tongue, because when the children are very, good in learning languages, they will learn other subjects very easily. This is what the research says. And the parents should also maintain a regular connection with learning objectives and be fully aware of its accomplishments by their ward. This also is required from the parents. Discussion with the subject teachers to devise ways to bridge the learning gaps. Observe when your child all of a sudden doesn't want to tell you about what's happening in the school, or if he becomes angry, doesn't want to come to school, I think they should go deeper into this problem and find out what exactly is the reason. Why is this happening? They should come up with a plan to help their child, to participate in school decision-making agendas, to communicate with teachers and other school personnel to keep check on learning graph of the child. I think these are some initiatives teachers should undertake and the parents should undertake so that we are able to handle this challenge of learning, cumulative learning deficit.
Thank you, Dr. Paramjeet. And I think it's a collaborative effort, and you can't make this happen if it is just the teacher. I think the collaborative effort of both the teacher and the parent, and this is where a new challenge emerges, because traditionally schools have actually kept parents at an arm's length, right? And which is how traditionally it was. Let's accept it and move on. But going forward, considering that the parent has been in the classroom digitally for almost 1.5 years, now there's no way that you're going to do away with them. So I'm going to move on to Rajiv. Mr. Rajiv, let me come ask you for your perspective on this very important topic that we've been discussing. What are your thoughts about what should the kind of support children get, and what's the role of a parent and a teacher? Rajiv, I think you're on mute. Can I request you to just unmute yourself, please? Perfect. You're on mute now.
Thank you, Sultan, and it's been a pleasure listening to all the wonderful panelists, and I must say it's a very rewarding experience. I have been a student myself, as far as learning goes, a student of how learning takes place. And the question that comes, we have been raising in our groups also, does learning ever stop? Does learning ever stop? Because when we define learning, I think we focus too much on the classroom learning or the curricular learning, whereas our mind and our brains, they are capable of continuing the learning in one way or the other. The pathways do change. So when we have periods like this, which enforce something like a pandemic, which made us all reflect on how classroom learning has been going on, what are the challenges with the teaching learning processes, how it moved from the chalk and talks to the digital platforms. I think these were all very, very meaningful reflections which came out, and we all were able to focus once again to learning, how learning takes place. In fact, before coming to this panel, I was, because there's a board exam going on, being a CBSE center, and I was, being the CS, I visited a classroom where some of the students, they were appearing today, and incidentally, these were the students with special needs. So they were appearing for their board exam, and there were these scribes who were helping them out. And when I interacted with these students, I said, so how are you doing? They said, we are almost done. And I remembered that, all this talk that we are doing about learning gaps. And I remembered that when the pandemic started, or when the schools went off the regular in-person classes, these students, they were in 8th grade, March 2020. Now they are appearing in 10th standard boards. And all this while, this kind of a teaching learning has taken place on this platform of mostly on the digital platforms, where we assume that, a lot of gaps have been created. So these are children with special needs. I think they are at the forefront when we talk about the interaction which is needed, the in-person classes, or which the absence of which is a very pertinent point these days, when we talk about the learning gaps. So when these children were comfortable sitting in this exam center, and they said that, yeah, we are almost done. Not that, this is the first interaction I have had with them over this period, we have been interacting on different platforms, trying to find that these children are equally taken care of as the other children as far as their cumulative learning is concerned. That's one area. Secondly, as I said, that does learning ever stop? We do have our own way of finding out, and instead of waiting for the PISA or the NAS surveys to give us some sort of feedback, which is more of generic nature, more on the national kind of scenario, we, during this period when the regular classes were not there and the teaching learning had moved to the digital platforms, we did try to find out the real learning, if it is happening or not, through various surveys, the feedback, with the data as we call it. So, and we were conscious that we are not going to talk about the curriculum as a whole, but the competencies, which is more important, as far as our moving forward is concerned, when we are, in fact, in relation to the NEP also. This is how the learning is going to be in the future. So even those surveys gave us this kind of an idea that we could not find much learning gaps as far as their competencies were concerned. So for these kinds of surveys, we did make use of the digital platforms, the Google Forms, the in-person Viva, and so on, so that if there was a course correction which was required, we could follow that. So yes, when we talk about the other aspects of education, which is not particularly curriculum based, when we talk about the psychosocial aspects, when we talk about the health and well-being, when we talk about the life skills, yes, there are gaps which we were able to identify, which we try to address also. And now with the schools opening, there will be more focus on that. So these are some of the insights which I would wanted to put across, at this forum, because when we are, talking a lot about learning gaps, let's also talk about which kind of learning gaps we are talking about. Are we totally focusing on the curriculum based learning, or are we also including learning as a whole, where I said, does learning ever stop? The curriculum based learning might have had a hit here or there, but as such, these are also the opportunities which made the children and the teachers, and in fact communities as a whole, as learners, change their pathways of learning, and in fact adapt to a new format of learning. Maybe learning happened in clusters, as we say, and there's better learning and more learning, or more valuable learning which is happening now.
Right. Thanks, Rajiv, for those wonderful insights. And for me particularly, I picked up a couple of questions from you, which I think are very critical. How does learning take place? Right, and I think an understanding at an institutional level of for delving deeper into this question. And the second one, does learning stop? Right, an understanding of this gives you a direction, and you also very clearly mentioned it's not just academic, but you need to look at the overarching idea of education itself. Moving on from here, I'm reminded of a very important life skills that need to be taught to children today. Probably the most important skill we need to teach children today is learning how to learn. Because, gone are the days where information, knowledge, solving problems were all valued in the past. Today, what you need to teach children is how do you go about looking for, how do you go about learning itself? And very interesting. I think these are some very relevant questions which at a very macro level, if a school can answer it, the outcomes will be directions for you to solve this problem. Moving on, I'm going to request Harmeet Kaur ma'am to come in and share her perspective on this interesting topic that we've been deliberating. Very important, very, on this, ma'am.
Thank you, Sultan. It's been, first of all, a pleasure to be on this platform today, learning a lot from everybody. Everybody has almost touched all the points. My perspective will be slightly different. My focus probably is going to be on the value system, which has crashed over a period of time. The real situations which we are facing, talking of the utopian K-12 structures of education, and then, facing the ground reality was completely different when we opened the schools. The student behavior, taking them away from the devices they were so used to, rather addicted to, was a challenge for our teachers. Making them concentrate inside the classroom was another challenge. Engaging them in something constructive was the biggest challenge in front of the teachers. I always used to say to the teachers before this pandemic, it says technological advancements, if not matched with the learning inside the schools, the education systems will become fossilized. Same thing happened. What all could have been achieved in the next 5 years, step by step, we would have gone, we did it in 5 months. Everybody agrees to that. Technologically, we have advanced a lot. But over a period of time, when we talk of engaging the students, the biggest challenge which came in front of us was the communication skills of the children. They were so restraining themselves to the devices. The language they were using was again all what they were typing, what they were writing skills were lost somewhere. Peer interaction was very less. They were not interacting with each other initially. We started with group tasks. We brought in the group leaders into the focus, group learning started. Slowly we were able to, open up the children. But somewhere, one factor which everyone faced was there was a fear in the minds of the children. Fear of the unknown. This pandemic probably taught them this thing. Not ready to have faith on others. Not trusting. Somewhere we interacted with the parents also. We started calling, parents one by one. I could very clearly analyze this thing, that what has been taught to these children probably in this scenario was, don't have faith on anybody, don't trust anybody. Because that was, the system which the children were taught, don't touch anybody, don't talk to anybody, you have to maintain a distance. This distance could be seen in physical classrooms today. To break that circle, to bring them into normal thinking and to bring them back into the system, juniors were able to do it very easily. The very first day, you want to imagine the way the children, coming and jumping and then, hugging each other. That was the scene. I said, now where to maintain the distance amongst the primary children? For them, their friends was like after a long time meeting them and you tell them about mask, they will remove their mask and talk because this is how they wanted to. Then that was okay. Talking of personality development here, that was one area I told the teachers we'll have to work on. We will have to open up the minds of the children, which had been closed for probably the last 1 year. 1.5 years. They did not interact with anybody, no group activities, nothing. They were being taught to keep everything to themselves only. That was one challenge. And thankfully, my teachers took a keen interest into it. We devised the activities in such a way where there was a lot of peer learning going into it, peer group activities, sharing, caring for each other. So that is how we are able, but still it is not 100%. Let me tell you very frankly, it's not 100%. Still, there is some sort of fear. The parent fear is reflected amongst the children. Second thing, which was the biggest thing which came, was where I would like to point out the parents out here also. Sultan, we had started, online testing. What happened in the online testing? right under the nose of the parents. Parents talk of values.
Yeah.
What were the parents doing? Encouraging the children to cheat and give the answers right under their nose. Now, what did we teach the children in the long run? Shortcuts. You tell them honesty. Today, they are not able to understand this word called honesty. Now, something which we have ingrained in their minds, is it easy to take it out of their minds? They are living in a world of convenience where they feel that what they see from their parents, they are molding their principles according to their own convenience. Education system is going to very, very badly be hit by these systems where the child feels, a 7th class student in my school, it happened during this examinations. One example I'm giving you, a 7th class student is telling the teacher, you give me the answer sheet of so-and-so child because I want to get 70 marks out of 80. Because for him, he did not take it that this is something wrong. Because this is what they have been trained for from the past 1.5 years. Now, over here, we have been calling the orientations of the parents, and I am literally asking them bluntly. I said, what did you do with the children for the 1.5 years? This is what we have taught them. Just a mad race for, the marks and all. Our value system has.
So how are you addressing this, ma'am? The point that you're making, Harmeet ma'am, is, according to me, the most critical issue that most schools will face and will have to. So what are you doing? What are those things that are working? What have you tried and failed? Can you just throw light on that?
Sultan, it is one-to-one interaction, class-wise, section-wise, I'm calling the parents and I'm telling them, I said, please change your way of upbringing your kids. Actually, what is happening in the families is we are training them in such a way, you write one page, I'll give you one chocolate. You write one this, I'll give you this. Incentive-based.
Yeah.
What are I'm telling them, I said, please change your parenting ways. And to some extent, it has helped also, right? Because you catch them as young as nursery students, parents. Because all these chocolates and the chips will become mobiles and motorcycles by the time they come to +1 and +2. One child commits suicide, there are 1,000 parents behind them who tend to become scared. Practical scenario is this is what is happening, intolerance amongst the children. Because we are not training them to, they are not being trained to say no. Parents are not saying anything no. Whatever they are demanding, they are getting. This is where the fault lies. Upbringing of the children. The value system has to be taught from the home. You cannot leave everything to the schools, which the parents have started thinking, And they agreed, Sultan. The best part was when I addressed the parents on these issues, I said, look, what did you teach them? You taught them dishonesty. We were teaching them honesty inside the schools. And they agreed. And they promised, they said, ma'am, next time, I said, next time, let's not hope for any pandemic or closure of the schools. But I said, please do think on these issues.
Absolutely. And you've highlighted, I think every school, every teacher, every principal will have to, in their own ways, address this part before you actually start talking about subject and academics and all the other learning deficits that they will have. The personality deficit is what you're talking about.
We will have to teach the students, we'll have to bring them out of this fear of assessments, first of all. I started with open book assessments. Now, only to teach the children that looking from the books is not always cheating.
Right.
At least these sort of activities were done inside the classrooms where internal assessment was, children were assessed on open book tests. So that they come out of this, that it is not always cheating, is not always looking into the books, is not always cheating. So these were certain activities, which we started and we practically succeeded to a great extent. But then behavior issues are there. Children have become, very, very stubborn. They have become very, very lonely also. Somewhere we have seen that loneliness in the eyes of the children, not easily opening up. So these were the issues, where parent orientation was required. And moreover, when the parents are telling them, don't have faith on anybody, you should not trust anybody. The world is like this, it is all evil all around. You cannot actually live in a world, where you are trying to teach them these insecurities. So
Right.
security had to be given. Emotional security was supposed to be given.
And you've highlighted an extremely critical point. Psychologists, educators across the world are absolutely clueless, because 1.5 years to 2 years almost in some cases, when there is an isolation, we don't have in recent memory any situation where we have gone through something like this. The closest apparently is called as post-war syndrome. Whenever any country has gone through a war, that is the time when extended periods where children have been locked up at home. And this was probably the closest. So only 2 years, 3 years down the line, we will all get to know what changes have happened in our children, in our society. In the meantime, we have to use our wisdom, our experience to make things work. And I'm so glad to hear that that was the first thing you focused on, right? Which is you have to address the, the big elephant in the room first before you start doing the others. And I'm so glad you brought out that point. So let me move to Mr. Girish. Mr. Girish, your thoughts on this larger challenge that we're talking about today, on the learning challenge of children in this new post-pandemic NEP implementing year.
Thank you, Mr. Sultan, for this wonderful opportunity, and good afternoon, all the dear panelists. It was enlightening listening to all of you, and I think all the three panelists have given a different tangent to this topic of today. I think while the first panelist was quite literal about it, the second panelist became a little philosophical about this topic, and Madam Harmeet talked about the importance of value system in the families and in the children. I think it was a different tangent altogether. And I believe, as a principal, absolutely I endorse Harmeet Madam's point of view that as principals, as schools, we've been able to cater to the academic information as much as we could during the pandemic. But what was actually missing was the teaching of soft skills, teaching of values. And I think once the schools have opened, we've resumed our games in the school and we've resumed our co-curricular activities. Children are back to the grounds and they are playing hard. They are learning all these important skills which they were missing almost for 18, 19 months. So now they learn how to fail. Now they learn how to fall. Now they learn how to help. Now they're collaborating with each other. So I think delayed, but then we are back into the normal, and let's thank God for it. As far as teachers' roles concerned, I believe, better than, like a Japanese proverb says, better than 1,000 days of diligent study is 1 day with a great teacher. I think our teachers are the game changers, and we need to motivate our teachers to continue to bring about change in the lives of the students. I picked up a few points as far as the academic information is concerned. I picked up a few points from my panelists, and I picked up a few points from the other panelists in the previous session. I think it's very important to find out as teachers and as a system, we need to find out the actual learning deficit in terms of academics in our children by testing their previous knowledge. And then as a school, we need to create a learning culture inside the classroom, in the school overall. So every child, like our panelists have been talking about, we need to create a kind of learning culture. Even Mr. Sultan mentioned about the importance of creating the learning culture. So we need to create the learning culture that everybody feels motivated. As teachers, we need to maintain the student profiling so that we know where we left the child last year and where we are picking the child from this year. We need to create independent learners through some innovative pedagogical tools to be used in the classrooms. Maybe we can think about flipped classrooms or promote self-study. Motivation is, I think, a game changer. So we need to motivate our children. to be self-learners, and so that the learning gaps are not created at all. We need to bridge the gaps by creating some special like bridge courses. One of the panelists talked about bridge courses in the previous session, and some special worksheets, some fun activities to be created so that children are back to the routine. And also one very important point which I picked up from one of my previous panelists was having knowledge sharing sessions in the schools. So amongst teachers on a weekly basis, we can perhaps share the best practices, and we can perhaps share knowledge with each other so that, we are able to revive the interest of students in the academics through engaging activities. While I was doing B.Ed, many years ago, I'm reminded of one very first class of my B.Ed, and where teacher was teaching us the meaning of education, and she told us education has been derived from a Latin term called educere. Educere means to bring out what is hidden in a child. So we as teachers need to know the education lies already inside the child. We are just a facilitator, 9th, 10th, as they say, 9th, 10th of education is just encouragement. Encourage the child to bring out what already lies hidden inside the child. So motivation plays a key role. And we must love our children, we must take care of them. And I think we as teachers will be successful in bridging that learning gap which has been created by the pandemic. Also, involvement of parents is very important, because education is, I believe it's a triangle in which the student is one side and the teacher is the other side and the parent is the third side. And the parents play a key role. They are the partners in the growth of our children. So sensitizing the parents about the cumulative learning deficit and importance of bridging the gap is very important. Sharing learning objectives, one of my panelists talked about this. It's a very important thing that we must share the learning objectives so that parents know what are the goals, what are the aspirations. We must conduct parent orientations. We must have frequent PTMs and discuss about the child-specific areas which need extra attention so that parents can help too. Involving parents who can take classes, who can perhaps help us bridge those gaps at a mass level would be another wonderful idea. Involving alumni in doing so would be a wonderful idea. So I think these are the ways wherein we can perhaps bridge those gaps. And when it comes to the building value systems, once again, I think co-curricular activities and sports are the grounds where value systems are built. So I think we are back to the normal, and we should all focus upon bringing the normalcy back to our learning systems too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Girish. Very specific, to the point. I love your statement, how to fail, fall, and help, which is the ground the sports field teaches our children. I'm going to take this liberty to talk about what I predict is the future of schools. I've had this habit, and I've done that many times on many large platforms. Parents, teachers, students do now realize that digitally you can learn concepts, you can learn subjects, you can answer questions. So your academic knowledge is possible digitally.
Yes.
And that is where it ends. And that is where a school should start its focus. I think we've long focused on grades and marks. It is important. I always give this example saying academics is like my right hand and overall development is my left hand. I can't just keep working out my right hand and not working out my left hand, right? So I need to focus on the overall development. I see a future where successful schools are centers of activity.
Mr. Sultan, I must add a bit here if you permit me. This pandemic has given us two very glaring oxymorons. First is the physical, they call about social distancing. I believe social distancing is a misnomer. Absolutely. We should be socially connected to each other. We must have physical distancing, okay, yes, to keep ourselves safe, but not social distancing.
I don't know who coined that word.
I don't know, but globally this has been talked about.
Yeah.
And second oxymoron which this pandemic has given us is online education. Now, when they have limited the education only to academic knowledge.
Yes.
Education cannot be complete online. It is not possible to have online education. We can pass on information, have academics online, but when it comes to complete education, we have to have the physical schools.
The right word is online learning. You can learn.
Yes. Yes.
You cannot get educated online. And
absolutely.
All of
absolutely.
us be very clear about that. So thank you for that perspective, Mr. Girish. I have a quick question. I'm going to ask Rajiv because it's somewhere related to what you were talking, Rajiv. This is Nidhi asking a question, Nidhi Sharma. How can I, as a teacher, help a student who is learning deficient to cover both what he is deficient with as well as what the new syllabus I need to teach? So I'm sure all of you are dabbling with this challenge. So I will have your perspective and maybe Harmeet ma'am's perspective on this question.
When it comes to the curriculum and the syllabus, I am the last person, in fact, to give my specialized opinion, because
I know that. That's why I specifically asked you the question.
Yeah, because when I address my students and when I address the parents and when I address my teachers and when I interact with them, I say, please do not talk to me about the grades, the scores, the score cards. Let's talk about, growing up. Let's talk about, taking care of ourselves, taking care of the communities. So when it comes to, these specific gaps as we are talking about and which are curriculum focused, I in fact do not have many solutions to offer. I say these are byproducts. Let's focus on the first things first, which is about raising our children the best way we can to become independent thinkers so that they can make a sense of themselves and the world around them as future custodians of this planet. These scores and deficits, these are not important. Let us not, put too much focus on these. These will on their own be learned. Today we are learning something, tomorrow it will become obsolete. So what is more important here is let's focus as teachers, as educators, as parents on raising these children with their own sense of themselves and of the world around them, for which the school, as you just said, should start where these academic programs end, with a lot of focus on a lot of life skills, value-based, connections, networking. And as I say, that you just mentioned, about the future of schools. My idea of the future of schools is schools are moving away from the campuses and the classrooms. In the future, the learning and education will be happening in the communities, which are networking communities, where a lot of focus will be on sharing and learning from each other.
Well said. Well said. And how I wish, we have more takers to this, philosophy and your thought, because that is, I'm convinced on it. In fact, my company's name literally is Learning the X Factor of Life, because we learn so much, but we don't learn about life or living itself. So let's move on. Harmeet ma'am, your perspective, how would you address this problem? Because I'm sure this is a question which a lot of parents will come and ask. It's in the face kind of a question. How would you respond to that? And Mr. Rajiv, I have to acknowledge, I love the fact that you said you don't have an answer. And I think it's so important for us as leaders to acknowledge that there are certain things that we are living with and we are finding those solutions. Thank you for that acknowledgement. I thoroughly appreciate that.
Thank you, Sultan. I completely agree with Rajiv. Rajiv very beautifully has explained. Talking of the practical aspect of it, I would bring down to the classroom situations, how to tackle these problems, because we have been doing it in my school. I have been encouraging this thing. I have differently abled children in my classrooms. Believe me, one child in a classroom changes the class environment. The rest of the students become more responsible. Peer learning, peer support is what actually helps these children. They come out because emotional security is what they need. The first thing, Learning comes later on. They are able to cover up whatever, I mean, is given to them. I have children, those who, they are dyslexic also. I have children, those who are, CP, cerebral palsy also. They have been so well supported by their own peers that at times it is amazing to see the concern, amazing to see the amount of help they give, even taking those children to the washroom and then helping them out there even. So this is how we are sensitizing the society in the long run.
Absolutely.
This is what is required. I was like reading a very beautiful proverb. There was a quotation somewhere, in the WhatsApp group only, somebody sent it, and I really wanted to share it. He says, when the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will change.
Wow. Yeah, that's so beautiful. And thank you so much, Harmeet ma'am. You've highlighted, according to me, one of the most underutilized resources in a school, which is a classmate, which is a fellow student. There is enough and more research to suggest that teenagers, because that's the age when the pack behavior starts, because we're more closer to wolves apparently than any other animals. And we live in packs. I mean, wolves live in pack, we live in societies. And that's the age group where we tend to, and all of us through our experiences know, we learn more from our classmates than we did from our teachers. Because half of us didn't understand what was happening in the classroom. And that's when we went back. And I remember in my engineering college days, most of the learning happened at the peer level. Most of the learning happened at the peer level. And somehow it's a hugely underutilized resource. And this is what in a panel last month online, I was speaking about an EdTech conference. I said, when EdTech is talking about personalized, customized, all of that, this large aspect of learning, which is peer learning, is completely missing out. So thank you for highlighting that. And as teachers and principals, let's also accept that there are students who can help us solve some of the problems, and we don't have to solve all of them.
Sultan, let me tell you honestly, this thing, the group system, group learning inside the school, at least I have tested that, and which has brought my school to a zero failure school, where nobody actually fails, because peer learning is so strong. The group learning system has come out to be so effective. Now, over a period of time, children have got used to this thing, asking their peers, asking the group leaders, they couldn't understand this concept, and it's wonderfully working well.
So true. And I'm going to go to Vandna, Shahi ma'am to sum up the whole session. But before that, I'm so itching to comment on that group schooling, because our education system for decades has made such selfish individuals. Because it was about my studies, my assignment, my class, my grades, my promotion, my qualification, my job, everything was about me. And we were actually told, mind your own business.
Yeah.
Stop, going out and studying in groups. So, we were actually discouraged from being in groups. And eventually, when you've landed a job, you're supposed to work in a team. When you become an entrepreneur, you're not supposed to inspire a team. When you're it's so contradictory. And I think your suggestion of trying to encourage groups of students who support each other as peers, I think it's a great idea. Vandna ma'am, it's been a fantastic and a very fascinating perspectives. Dr. Paramjeet, with her experience, spoke about from a very different vantage point, and so did, Rajiv, slightly more philosophical, a school of thought which is kind of dying in today's edtech world of numbers and grades. And then you have Girish, who's so sportsman, almost, a sports director kind of a view, which is about, how things in a physical sense teach you a lot about life. And touching upon Harmeet's points, I'd like you to sum up this wonderful interaction that we've had.
Thank you so much, Sultan. I too agree with you that there was so much of learning, so many takeaways today that a few I forgot to note down. I was actually enjoying listening to all of them. So, but I would start with Nidhi's question and Rajiv's answer. I really liked, as you said, that for addressing this particular problem, I don't have practical ways, it is just a byproduct. Just mentor, motivate, and only then you will be able to monitor. You have to monitor to identify the gaps and then bridge those gaps. That was so wonderful. And Sultan, when we were thinking about this particular segment, it was like we are kind of addressing the general deficit that is existing. But one thing that I have realized during this discussion was like this pandemic has actually aggravated the situation to that extent. There was a survey that I was going through which said that if children have not come to the school for 1.5 years, the learning loss is for 3 years. That's kind of eye opener. And the most important thing is that that holistic model of education that has come upside down. That's the biggest thing, because to some extent, as I said in the beginning, that on the learning outcome, there was no focus. So, I mean, to some extent, academic part was taken care. But the value system, as Harmeet mentioned, but I would again say that, that's the problem. As principals, as educators, we are the only ones who have to actually find out the solutions, the practical solutions also we have to find out. And definitely it is going to take some time, but they would come, as Paramjit ma'am also mentioned about. It's very, very important to identify the gaps and take the remedial actions on time, stitch in time. That's what she talked about. And again, here in this aspect also, I would say the data would play a very, very important part, because interpreting, analyzing, and using the data effectively to design the next step and assessment for learning, it should be taken as critical input for improvement instead of an output just to label a child, just to give the marks or the grades to the children. And Harmeet as well as Girish, both of them, they talked about involving the parents, teachers and parents working in tandem with each other. Together they have to do it. We have to tell them about our learning objectives and also the expected learning outcomes. They should be clear to the parents so that they become the equal partners. And there was one thing that we were taught in pedagogical leadership also, I would definitely like to mention here, because NEP talks about learning for all. So there, the universal design of learning, UDL, where we say fixing the lesson, right? And the other one is differentiated instruction, which we call as fixing the student. With UDL will come at the planning level, and differentiated instruction would come at the implementation level, where as per multiple intelligence model, we would execute, we would implement the lesson as per the need of the children. So that was a wonderful, wonderful session. Thank you so much, everyone, for such wonderful learning from all of you. Thank you so much. And thank you, Mentor and LXL for organizing this particular workshop.
I'm so glad we put this together, and it's fascinating to listen to all the views. So on behalf of Mentor and LXL Ideas, I'd like to thank Vandna ma'am for co-hosting this, and to our amazing panelists, Harmeet ma'am, Dr. Paramjit, Mr. Girish, and Mr. Rajiv. Such a pleasure hosting and interacting with you digitally. I'm so glad we could do this. And for all those amazing participants, we had over 250 of them consistently through this session. Thank you all so much. I'm sure there is some valuable learning that we're taking back from this. Thank you so much. And it was a pleasure hosting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.